Good morning to everyone and welcome to join our Auntie webinar today. Our topic for today is respectful interaction at work. Before we begin it with the actual presentation, I want to remind you that your microphones are muted. You are free to share your thoughts and ideas in the chat. And should you have any questions for us that we would like to discuss at the end, please use the Q&A section for those. Our expert for today is our Auntie professional Hanna-Kaisa Raninen. Welcome, Hanski, to join us. And the topic, of course, is respectful interaction at work. A relevant topic that it's kind of easy to say, yeah, this is important, but today we'll tackle this from a practical point of view. So how do you make the most out of it in our daily lives? But with that, being mindful of the time, we have about 30 minutes to spare for this topic. I will let our expert take the floor. So Hanna-Kaisa, stage is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Mikael, and on my behalf as well, welcome to listen to this topic this morning. At least it's morning for me when giving this webinar. And for you guys who are maybe listening later of this recording. Shortly about me, my name is Hanna-Kaisa Raninen. I work as an Auntie professional with Auntie. I work with our clients one-on-one and then give trainings and education in organizations, our client companies as well. My background is in sport and exercise psychology and business administration, mostly work with stress management, recovery, executive coaching, leadership, and teamwork related themes at Auntie and also elsewhere. But getting into the most important thing today, so our topic and our agenda. So I've divided this into 3 blocks. So let's go into facing differences in an appreciative manner, then the how of respectful and appreciative interactions, and then your own notions and comments, ideas, experiences that you want to share, any questions you want to ask. You can, of course, write them already during the webinar, but then at the end you have possibilities to get those answered and commented on. But let's get into it. How to face differences at the workplace in an appreciative manner. So, of course, this is a saying, differences between people are a richness, not a threat. And it can be easy to comment like this on a general level, that this is what we all believe and feel, and this might be an important value for many people within the work setting. However, it can become burdensome when the differences in personalities or differences in the ways of working then affect us in a negative manner. So then it can be not so easy to accept those differences. And oftentimes within the working community, it can be difficult to accept that somebody is used to doing things in a different way. For example, if you are used to getting things done in good time and somebody kind of takes their time and delivers the result at the very last minute. So then there is some stress for sure involved for the person who is used to doing things pretty quickly and in good time. And we can think about these differences and how they're structured in many ways. And there are commercial analysis, such as DISC analysis and all of those, who kind of uncover those differences in many ways. So different behavior profiles can be recognized, and those can be useful to understand those differences in a better way. And those analyses make it visible that we are actually very different in how we think about things and how we do things. So there is no malicious intent when we do things differently. It's just kind of how we are prone to behave. And those analyses can differentiate if people are more extroverted or introverted, if they're more precise or more broad in their thinking, if they are more fast or calm in tempo in getting things done usually, or dominant or compliant. So these type of classifications, for instance, are very usual in those analyses. But it's good to have these breakdowns sometimes and talk about them, make them visible, to understand that where the other person is coming from is just how their personality and temperament is, that it's not something that is personal to you, that they are making these things in a different way. And then it's easier to have kind of an appreciative attitude towards that person, to know that there is no malicious intent involved. And it's good to understand that we have a bias towards the familiar. So we tend to appreciate people who work and behave in a similar manner than ourselves. So this is something that is very good to be aware of and kind of stop and notice that this is a situation where I'm facing something very different from how I would maybe act. And our human information processing kind of also moves in the direction of kind of what is ours, what is mine, that feels right and correct. So something very different from that feels that this is not quite right. For example, we can see that 9 out of 10 Finnish motorists and people who drive cars think that they're better drivers than the average driver. And we also know that people kind of prefer the letters in their own name to other letters. So those things that are familiar to us, how we behave, we tend to kind of move towards that. It's just an important reminder for us to remain open to different ways of doing things and kind of stopping and noticing that. So the appreciation comes from stopping and noticing and understanding and accepting that this is a factual thing, that we are different in this way. Well, then kind of going into what is usually important in social experiences. We can be different in many ways, but we usually have a pretty similar expectation and kind of the basic elements that are needed when interacting with each other, not depending on our personalities as much. So kind of these things here make it possible for us to feel psychologically safe and respected, no matter our personality differences. And kind of with these principles here in mind, we can pass on appreciation to others in a work setting as well. So we know that we kind of crave status. So we want to be valued. I want other people to recognize that I have value in what I do and who I am. We also want certainty. I want to know what my role is. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what other people are thinking. I want to know kind of what the vision for the future is. So all of those things are important as well. So we don't want to kind of feel that there is something going on that we are not quite sure what is the underlying thing that we are kind of instinctively experiencing. But we want to have certainty. Autonomy is also important. So kind of this feeling of control. I get to choose what I do. I get to choose how I do it and when I do it. Of course, in a work setting, this is not always the case, but having enough autonomy that I get to decide how I interact with people, for instance, and those sorts of things. So having a sense of control over your work and over your work setting, and also kind of in what way you want to interact. Autonomy and relatedness, all kind of basic psychological needs. Relatedness means that I belong, I feel I'm appreciated within this social circle or within the team that I'm working in. So I feel that my contribution is important and it's kind of seen by others. So it's somewhat related to status, but in a different way. So it's kind of that I am as I am, my personality and the way I interact as such is accepted. There are other people who may be a little bit different than me, but I feel that I'm seen and heard as I am. So this is, of course, a very basic need for everybody, not only in work settings, but also in other social settings. And fairness or equity. So feeling that I benefit as much as others, nobody is getting, in a way, unfair advantage. I am treated similarly than others. And this is somehow visible, and a feeling of fairness between people. Well, here is just kind of a quote from Antti Aro about psychological safety. And it means that it makes it kind of possible for us to feel that we can be vulnerable and incomplete. So it has this relatedness perspective that I was just talking about. So that we can be who we are, we can make mistakes, we can try new things. If we are feeling safe, that it's okay to do these things, it's okay to learn and be a little bit vulnerable. So of course, when we are able to create this type of environment, build trust between people that this is possible, then we kind of have the courage to take risks and be in the discomfort zone, so to speak, put yourself in the game more. Then going into the how of respectful and appreciative interactions between people in work settings. So building blocks of joy at work. So here, according to Furman and Ahola and Hirvihuhta, how appreciation can be shown at work. So they really accentuate the fun and kind of this light, positive atmosphere at work, and how that really builds to constructive interaction, innovation, creativity, and that feeling of safety as well that I was talking about before. So very important, that psychological safety that we are talking about so much nowadays, and what it means for interaction as well. So they have made this division of four things. So having appreciation by being interested in each other's work. So asking for viewpoints, knowing what the other people are doing, also kind of interacting and communicating where you are in your work, and just genuinely being interested in what other people, what their expertise is, what their viewpoint is in this particular matter, and kind of asking for their feedback as well. So people really love when other people ask for their viewpoint, their professional expertise on a matter. Then also, of course, giving positive feedback either directly to the person when there is a good time to do that, they have done something that you appreciate. So rather than just thinking about it, that this was a good thing, actually expressing it out loud as well. So this is something, or then through a third person. So talking to somebody else, what a good job person X has done. And then it kind of flows through from that person as well, that I heard good feedback about you. So this kind of builds this atmosphere of respect and appreciation at work. Or then speaking appreciatively of others when they are not around. So even then kind of saying that, hey, Susan, for instance, is really good at this, or she did a lot of good work for me or helped me in some way, or whatever it is, but also kind of having this respectful interaction when those people are not physically there at the moment. And then also, if you're in a role as a manager or a boss somehow, or a team lead who is distributing tasks, by also kind of distributing those challenging development tasks where people can develop and further their competencies. So those are very important for people to feel competent, for people to have that autonomy, that relatedness as well that we were talking about before. And then having kind of fun, light banter as well at work. So knowing people on a personal level as well. Of course, there is a work setting and people are working through their work role, and that's a very healthy thing to do. But also knowing other people somehow on a personal level, that there is kind of this funness, lightness, banter that is not even work related always, is very positive. So having this type of a positive atmosphere helps. Then also, if there are differences, talk about and communicate those as well. And that there is trust, that people actually know each other. So then it's easier when those differences come about to also ask for clarification or ask for help or come back to a matter and ask that I actually didn't quite understand what you meant. That could you clarify? Well, in everyday interactions, it's important to pay attention to your own ways of interacting. How should I formulate my message to make it easier for others to receive it? Clarity, being succinct, and appreciative tone, of course, helps in this, even when we're talking about a little bit heavier subject matters. It's also good to check if there is something difficult to discuss, if the other person has a good time right now to discuss this matter. So if there is something heavy, something you kind of need to resolve, so also checking from the other person that is now a good time to talk about this rather than going directly into it. And likewise, you can also check your own listening skills. How good are you in actively listening what the other person in fact is saying? Can I just kind of relax and try to quiet that active mind who is already thinking about what I'm going to say next and just kind of allow myself to listen? Look at the micro expressions of the other person. What type of nonverbal messages are they giving me? What is what they are really saying, and really listening, even if it really differs from your own views. Sometimes when we hear an opinion that we know that we're kind of opposed of or it's not our own view of things, then we instantly start activating. And this is, of course, very human. We start to think about our response, what we want to say, and how we want to counter that opinion. So a good practice and an exercise for you is to try maybe in a work setting or some other setting, if that comes up, to kind of try to notice that active mind and just focusing on listening what the other person has to say, even if the opinion differs from your own. Here is a quote from Stephen Covey, which I think is a very wise one. So when there are conflicts with someone, it's very common for us to withdraw from the interaction and just kind of resent the other person behind their back. And sometimes these interactions also happen so quickly that it can be kind of impossible in that particular time to immediately be open and ask more questions or ask for clarifications. But in general, it would be worthwhile to go towards the difficult and try to clarify a relationship that seems awkward. And a good basic assumption in interactions would be to kind of assume the best of the other person, that they have meaningful reasons for acting the way they do. And as I said before, that there is no malicious intent involved, that there is kind of reasons for them to be acting like this. Sometimes it can be also lack of self-awareness or lack of communication skills, that the people are doing the best that they can with the resources that they have available at the moment. They may not be able to regulate their emotions, for instance, in a similar way that you are used to, but kind of being understanding that they are coming from the best place possible is a pretty good assumption to be made, and maybe also kind of lowers your own irritation level somewhat. And here is kind of an example of what you can maybe say, what you can do. So kind of raising the issues that you were confused about and having a low threshold of asking for clarification. Check from the other person. How did they see things in this interaction? You can tell about your own wishes, your own needs. So here, for instance, I was left a little confused. And I'm wondering what you meant in that afternoon meeting when you said that. So this is a pretty low threshold. You're not accusing them of anything. You're just kind of wondering, what did you mean when you said this? And then the other person has a chance to clarify, has a chance to maybe tell you something, and then you have a chance to ask maybe even more questions. And if in a meeting, for instance, somebody says something unpleasant towards somebody else, so that you are not quite involved, but somebody else is involved, there as well, it would be good to intervene in these type of interactions, just to clarify what the other person was saying, maybe in a way as here in this example. This is a very difficult skill and can be very difficult. Usually when talking to clients, the most difficult thing to do is to intervene in these type of interactions. And usually, as I said before, they go so quickly. It can be hard to intervene at that moment, but maybe kind of trying to have that in your toolbox as well, to come back to it and ask for clarification, or then next time you encounter this type of situation, to intervene on behalf of another person. So that's how we also build trust in these settings. So just to end this webinar here, kind of what we have been talking today about interaction, how you want to interact in an appreciative way. Is there something that comes to mind for you now? What small thing you could do differently to make your encounters with others a little bit more appreciative? And this is something that I'm hoping and looking forward to your comment section as well. If something comes up for you, questions, comments, shared experiences, or maybe a small thing like this that you could do. Maybe it's active listening, this exercise, that next time you'll really engage with the other person and be actively listening to them, or whatever comes to mind at this point. But thank you. I'm looking forward to your questions, comments, and we can build on that for the rest of the time that we have today.
Thank you, Hanna-Kaisa. Very practical and useful information. We have one question for you, or a comment with a question.
Good.
The message is as follows: is that I find it difficult to know how to handle conversation where the other person implies things about me. An example, that I have been lazy, which are not true at all. So if I draw attention to it by asking directly, an example, are you suggesting that I am lazy? It comes across as aggressive. So what would be a better solution for this?
Yes. Okay. Well, that is a very difficult situation and very frustrating when you're kind of hearing these impulses. But it's then good to stop and think that this is your interpretation of the situation, and it's good to ask for clarification. Maybe not just suggesting yourself that this is a question of laziness, or the other person is suggesting you're lazy, but maybe just in a similar manner than in the example, raising the question as, I didn't quite understand. Could you clarify that comment about whatever it is the person was then saying? And then they have a chance to clarify. So going about it a little bit more roundabout way than going instantly, are you suggesting I'm lazy, which is kind of a threatening sentence in that way, which is understandable because you're probably feeling threatened as well. So maybe just asking for clarification, some other way that, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. Could you clarify that last comment?
Yes. Thank you. And another question also, let's think of a scenario where the work community is kind of not reacting to things, or when they are reacting in a very negative or aggressive way. And how would a single individual in this instance maybe be able to tackle the situation or gather the courage to actually point this thing out?
Yes, well, I'm wondering kind of if the whole work environment is somehow toxic, or somehow that people are very, very negative, and there has been kind of this cynicism or negativity, or even somehow this threatening atmosphere going on. So for then, of course, the individual can be very hard to, on their own and by themselves, counteract such a heavy atmosphere that is going on. Of course, it's good to maintain your own integrity in a way that you are able to still commit to your own values, whatever they are, your core values of how you want to interact with people, and try to act through those values. That whenever you're taking that perspective, maybe later in life, and seeing kind of how you acted in those situations, you can kind of have that integrity that I at least committed to my own values of maybe equity and fairness and all of those things. But then on a second note, of course, HR, your own manager, it's good to then go when things are overwhelming. So the case is not anymore about personality differences and understanding those, but there is maybe harassment or bullying or that type of thing. So then going to the respective person that takes care of these things within an organization. So then, of course, going to HR, for instance, and raising the issue there.
Yes. Thank you for these insights and answers. These were actually the questions that we had so far. So if no other questions are come up on this point, I want to also remind you that we also have a blog post on this topic on Auntie's website. It's called Interactions of Many Kinds. I would warmly, of course, recommend that you go and have a look at the blog also after this webinar. And of course, we will be sending a recording of this to everyone who has registered for this webinar session, and it can also be found on our website afterwards. But hey, with that note, thank you for everyone who attended or was listening, and for the comments and questions on this topic. Thank you, Hanna-Kaisa, for the insights and useful tips and tricks on this matter. And we will see you again in our next webinar in next month. So hey, for my part, thank you. Have a great week and take care.
Thank you, everyone.